completed one of the biggest airlifts in history, with more than 120,000 people evacuated to safety. The extraordinary success of this mission was due to the incredible skill, bravery, and selfless courage of the United States military and our diplomats. That assumption that the Afghan government would be able to hold on for a period of time beyond military drawdown turned out not to be accurate. But I still instructed our national security team to prepare for every eventuality, even that one. And that's what we did. So we were ready. Now we believe that about 100 to 200 Americans remain in Afghanistan, with some intention to leave.
You also promised not to help to bring out those who helped America in its war effort. We've seen these heart-wrenching images at the Kabul airport of people trying to get there, say nothing of the people who can't get to that airport. You made the commitment to get American troops out, to get American citizens out. Will you make the same commitment to those who assisted in the American war effort over the last 20 years, number one? And then number two, what is your message to America's partners around the world who have criticized not the withdrawal, but the conduct of that withdrawal and made them question America's credibility on the world stage?
Mr. President, there had not been a U.S. service member killed in combat in Afghanistan since February of 2020. You set a deadline, you pulled troops out, you sent troops back in, and now 12 Marines are dead. You said the buck stops with you. Do you bear any responsibility for the way that things have unfolded in the last 2 weeks?
But war, it never changes. That's a famous line from the Fallout video games. There is truth in it, though. The technology and weapons may change, and various tactics and strategies must be adapted to reflect this, but the fundamentals are mostly the same as they were 2,000 years ago, which is why Sun Tzu's Art of War is still relevant and read by military professionals and strategists. One would hope that American and other Western nations' leaders would as well, which is part of the reason for this video. Can America win a war in these times? Can we pacify a country once we've defeated them? That should be an easy yes, but yet it's not. We have won many wars and counted ourselves great and victorious for it. The Revolutionary War, War of 1812, the Barbary Pirate Wars, World War I and II. We have even occupied and successfully pacified defeated enemies. Germany and Japan, both of whom not just surrendered but had their governments restructured into Western models that have largely been successful and lasting. But we have also failed and had results that could hardly be called a victory, like the Korean War, with a treaty that left a hostile nation as a thorn in our side, and certainly for South Korea, and maybe a bigger problem in the future. Waging war and pacifying a nation are two different things. Consider the Roman Empire's attempts at securing Britannia, Germania, and others, or Japan's invasion of Korea during the ill-fated Imjin Wars. Countless examples exist. It's not easy to win a war when you handicap your own forces, heavily restrict their movements and their tactics, ridiculous rules of engagement, limits on the equipment they have access to, and the like. Nor is allowing your enemies to have safe harbors, refusing to punish neighboring countries who provide them aid, arms, and places for them to build up and rally. These are mostly modern problems of Western nations like America, springing from politics, Western media involvement, modern technologies related to media, television, and then the internet, and a good bit, ironically, springing from our success as a nation, the high GDP of our capitalist society, and our isolation from other regions of the world thanks to huge seas washing our shores. Global conflicts are not right in our faces, making war seem less impactful in the immediate, always a problem happening far over there, and not right in our neighborhood. And this mindset and these other considerations have given our politicians and our citizenry the luxury of being tremendously ignorant about world history, warfare, global politics, strategy, global economics, logistics, regional relationships. And it's enabled social political movements that also had the luxury of, ironically, trash-talking the people, government structure, and past policies that give them that luxury. And this mindset has entrenched itself, allowing for a Barack Obama or a Joe Biden to act with dangerous incompetence, corruption, and naivety, so that the magnitude of their bumbling foreign policy actions in any other time in history would have garnered them a public execution, or to look out their window one day and watch as their city-state is burned to the ground and their people enslaved.
As many as 15,000 Americans and at least 65,000 Afghans and their families are still desperate to get out. We will go live to Kabul, but we begin here with George Stephanopoulos, one-on-one with the president.
Back in July, you said a Taliban takeover was highly unlikely. Was the intelligence wrong, or did you downplay it?
I think there was no consensus. If you go back and look at the intelligence reports, they said that it was more likely to be sometime by the end of the year.
You didn't put a timeline out when you said it was highly unlikely. You just said flat out it's highly unlikely the Taliban would take over.
Yeah. Well, the question was whether or not the idea that the Taliban would take over was premised on the notion that somehow the 300,000 troops we had trained and equipped was going to just collapse. They were going to give up. I don't think anybody anticipated that.
We've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
What I thought was we have to gain control of this. We have to move this more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport. And we did.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Or perhaps the latter is what they hoped for all along. Our failures in Vietnam, Iraq under 2 presidents, and Afghanistan all stem from heavy Western media interference acting as propaganda outlets for our enemies, undermining America and Western allies.
The outskirts of the village of Cam Knee with elements of the 1st Battalion 9th Marines. And we were walking into this village when you can hear what happened. Did you set fire to these houses here?
No, we were just off to the left when it was burning.
Were you getting fire from them?
Somewhat, not too much, just a little sniper fire.
There's little doubt that American firepower can win a military victory here. But to a Vietnamese peasant whose home means a lifetime of backbreaking labor, it will take more than presidential promises to convince him that we are on his side.
They stem from presidents who were tremendously ignorant about war strategy, the cultural, regional distinctions of the people we fought, even about how the world really works outside of their safe, privileged neighborhoods. They didn't have clear, achievable goals and an exit strategy. They were dangerously short-sighted, thinking only the next news cycle, poll numbers, public perception, the next election, not thinking about 5 years from now or 20, as many of our enemies do, as most leaders have in history been forced to do. Some of the complications were even the result of past short-sightedness. Our trials in Afghanistan, where in the 80s American intelligence and government officials, by order of our president, armed and supplied the people who would later become Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and their affiliates, did it for years just to prolong a proxy war with the Soviets. No consideration for later consequences, no consideration of the character of those they fully armed. Our leaders were too willing to go to war as well, not planning enough beforehand and not being as well informed or having realistic goals, considering how much the hampering effects of the problems I mentioned before would end up affecting the outcome, predictably so. And our leaders haven't just disagreed or changed up strategies from the prior administration to seek victory, they've not even shown a motivation to actually win, and instead have viewed our own military and country as nearly as bad as the enemy. I'm talking about you, Bill Clinton, and you, Barack Hussein Obama, and you, Joe Biden. There was no commitment to win, no willingness to do what was necessary, and a dangerous willingness instead to restrict and undermine the effort at every level, from insane rules of engagement, the repeated ignoring of commanders' recommendations, and the refusal to give troops and equipment necessary for battles and the mission. Look at Bill Clinton's shorting of armored vehicles, equipment, and other weapons to the U.S. military in Somalia, combined with unrealistic goals that led to the Black Hawk Down catastrophe.
We got a Black Hawk down, we got a Black Hawk down.
Just so Clinton could downplay our involvement, give him some talking points with the media, and because of plain cowardly squeamishness to do what is necessary and commit to winning once he'd stuck his big toe in the mess. And a deplorable lack of understanding about the way the world works. Then there was Obama and Hillary Clinton's huge bumbling mistakes in Libya that keep causing problems to this day. All lessons learned in past wars, ignored and repeated. In post-World War II Germany and Japan, after they surrendered, we left in place a significant portion of the existing infrastructure, the mid to low-level workers and officials. This created a controversy with regard to Germany, leaving Nazis in place rather than a complete removal, and it was famously countered that essentially we were going to leave in place those who knew how to keep the electricity going, the trains moving, and so forth. We did the same in Japan. And in truth, both cases, we did have populations with philosophical and ethical similarities to our own, and who in truth were very willing to move on. In Iraq, under George W. Bush, we did secure a victory and a surrender.
Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force. And I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory.
However, ignoring the lessons of history, we made the mistake of removing and banning the existing infrastructure, the Ba'ath Party, a party capable of holding on to power and resisting any Iranian attempts to replace it, especially with our help. And while I am no fan of the Ba'ath Party, then or now, this would have been the practical solution. Instead, the Bush administration bumbled about, ignorant about the local rivalries, regional consequences, and about Islam itself, based on a number of his public comments. Then Obama, when he got into office, began withdrawal of troops far more and far faster than should have been done against all military advice. And so then ISIS began its conquest, where they managed to easily take Mosul and capture several divisions worth of American-supplied weapons, armor, vehicles, the famous Ford trucks which ran around murdering, raping, enslaving, and cutting the heads off tens of thousands of Christians, Yazidis, and anyone else they wished, while Obama did nothing. The paper tiger that Bush and Obama had created collapsed because they did not spend enough time or effort to alter the dynamics of the country or understand the people and region, with many of those who signed up for the new Iraqi army just there to get an easy paycheck, figuring America would do most of the fighting or they'd just surrender when faced by an enemy. Similarly, we did not spend enough time or effort to overhaul Afghanistan, alter its culture and mindsets, as well as first defeating the Taliban and other groups who were there, pulling troops out when there was no victory achieved, as Obama did, forcing him to later have to put in a bunch as a surge, and even then not giving the commanders the numbers they said they needed, but only the least amount so he would have the situation remain stable and not affect his poll numbers. Then comes Biden. When he surrendered to the Taliban and performed a historic desperate retreat in the face of the enemy, kept citing that we'd been in there 20 years or whatever it was, and that was long enough, as if a quote of years is the determining factor rather than the accomplishment of goals and the mission. Here he also attempted to claim victory by saying he had accomplished the goal of preventing al-Qaeda from using Afghanistan as a base of operations and that they got Osama bin Laden.
We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11, 2001, and make sure al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We never gave up the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and we got him. That was a decade ago.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime.
Neither of which were either main goals or even achieved. Red herrings and strawman fallacies aplenty. Al-Qaeda was and is still present and operational in Afghanistan, and he knew that. Osama bin Laden was only one guy and wasn't even in Afghanistan when we took him out. What's more, in his desperate retreat from the country, which he and his administration ridiculously tried to spin as an achievement, like running away quickly as something to brag about, they left behind enough weapons, vehicles, and equipment that the Taliban was able to completely re-equip themselves and now have a gazillion night vision goggles and sights, a big advantage in modern warfare. An enormous stockpile of weapons weapons and armor, the entire armament of the Afghan army we gave to the regime we supported, who the Taliban defeated when Biden ran away.
Here on two things you pressed the president on. The president claims that military leaders did not tell him to keep some sort of smaller footprint on the ground, 2,500 troops. And he also said U.S. intelligence did not predict a collapse this quickly.
Yeah, he was very firm on that, David. On the intelligence first, he was saying, yes, people believe the Taliban might eventually take control, but no one expected it to happen with the speed and the rapidity that it happened, contradicting what we've heard from a lot of senators who got intelligence briefings, what some leaks from intelligence officials as well. But the president is very, very firm. He said that no one was predicting the Taliban would come into power this quickly, that the Afghan army, the Afghan political structure would just collapse over the course of a weekend. And I was also surprised that he did take on those who say the military was advising him to keep a small U.S. force, group of U.S. forces there, about 2,500 troops there.
I could speak of these sorts of mistakes all day. So how does America win a war in the future? The first thing would be to have far more understanding about the enemy. This isn't just cultural considerations like what a people eat for breakfast. It's the economics, it's the history, supply chains and local relationships and politics. It's regional considerations. Who is allied to who? What nations are on the border? What are we prepared to do about them if they interfere? And all this shouldn't be delegated out. Everyone from the generals to the president himself and his staff should know these things. There should be understanding about the consequences of the war. There should be willingness to do anything to win, even if it risks people's careers, including the president's. And I think this needs saying. I'd completely cram down on Western and other media in war zones who are only serving to sabotage us, destroy public support and the will of the people, which can be everything to winning. Most wars cost far, far more in lives and other metrics than we ever face today, and our ability to go into a battle and only lose a dozen guys or 100, those days are coming to an end, I fear, and our enemies are far too familiar with how to influence our citizenry, and they have open access to most people thanks to the internet. It's bad enough that is going on, propaganda generation of unprecedented proportions, but to have a media apparatus that's shown itself to be very much against their own country and culture and willing to trash talk the West, to undermine us to the point that we lose a war, unacceptable. We need to be practical and realize the truth here. We are in this for a whole civilization and our heritage. There are forces seeking to conquer us utterly. It is necessary to win any war we commit to, and equally necessary to not be so quick to engage in one. And we can win if we have the right leadership and remember the lessons of the past, and those lessons say first and foremost that you should be slow to make war, but decisive and tenacious once you do. Oh, and also stop electing liberals, socialists, and anti-white racists who are anathema to America and the best interest of its people. That is how you win.
A campaign on the harsh terrain of a nation as large as California could be longer and more difficult than some predict. And helping Iraqis achieve a united, stable, and free country will require our sustained commitment.